So, I've been asking this of everybody. What, if anything, do you do for TLG?
Oh, I do very little for TLG. I think Steve has probably told you we don't know a lot about what the other person does.
Sure.
And so he does do some stuff for me. He does more for me than I do for him.
He does some of the
But mine
surgery, gets in there.
no, he does my payroll. So he pays my employees. Very glad about that. Um, I do things like logistics help sometimes with, like he says, we're going to be going to this convention and we're going to be stopping in this town in 40 miles. Can you get me a hotel room? That's,
Sure.
that's about what I do. Now, when he has a big Kickstarter, I have been known to go down and package boxes and, just do whatever I can do to help. I have to have a lot of guidance, and I'm a much slower on the computer, so my boys don't really like me to help that much because I slow them down. But sometimes when the boys aren't there and I'm just helping Steve, I'll help him pack. When he was helping Ernie Gygax fulfill his memorial tomb Kickstarter, there was a lot of packing of boxes.
I
That
heard
that was
all about that one.
yeah,
It's like
that
chaos.
that was a labor intensive packing. And so Steve would line everything up around the table down, the big game table downstairs, and we would just literally walk in circles putting things in the boxes. And so he
Yeah.
would say, do this, and he'd hand it to me. So I can't say that I knew that much of what I was doing, except I was just an extra pair of hands.
You can never have too many of those in this
No, I
job,
know.
so. So I've heard that you own like your own medical practice.
Yes, I'm a neurologist, so I treat chronic diseases of the neurologic system. My area of interest is multiple sclerosis, so I have my own MS center, but I also do other general neurology. So I treat migraines and Parkinson's and epilepsy,
Wow.
and but my big focus is multiple sclerosis and
That's
other neuroinflammatory diseases of the nervous system.
How did you get into that like interest?
Well, it's kind of interesting. Well, at least it is to me. In college, I got a double degree in math and physics. And then when I was looking at graduate school, I was looking at going into biophysics. And I thought, do I want to be in the lab all my life or do I want to work with people? Because I actually like working with people. So I decided I wanted to work with people. So I applied to medical school, really not expecting to get in the first year because I had a math and physics degree, not a biology or chemistry degree.
Sure.
But they let me in for whatever reason. Um, and so as I was going through the studies, I really liked the brain because it was like a CPU and an electrical system. So it was very much something that I understood by electrical pathways. Nowadays, I would probably go into computer science, but
Sure.
the brain is kind of the CPU of the body, and so that's my thing is figuring out what circuits don't work and how to best get the CPU to work.
Wow. So it started as an interest with like computers and technology that kind of applied to
I'm
the
just
human
old
body.
enough that there was computer science degrees back then, but it wasn't
Sure.
clear what that meant. And now, so even when I was looking at going into biophysics, I wanted to understand the mechanisms of the biological systems, the physical and electrical mechanisms of the biological systems. So when I went to medical school, it just neurology spoke to me because and I've been very happy in my career. Being in medicine is difficult for other reasons, insurance companies
Sure.
and a lot of just running a business when I wasn't trained to run a business. There's a
Sure.
lot of issues like that. But as far as what I do, I really enjoy what I do.
That's amazing. It sounds like a really stressful job, but also super rewarding, like being able to heal and help people. Um,
It is, just like a lot of people, we focus on the negative and sometimes don't focus on the positive. And I say occasionally that God sends me some angels because on my hardest days, I have some of my most thankful, also have some of my most thankful patients,
yeah.
and that kind of keeps you going. When you think I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm walking away. I could make more money if I went into to work for a pharmaceutical company, like so I'm just like there's days like that. But I
Yeah.
enjoy my employees. I have a very, very good set of employees at my office, and I overall enjoy what I'm doing. But
Sure.
I have to say that being married to somebody outside of medicine has been nice, because when I come home, I will vent a little bit to Steve, but then I get to shut it off. I get to shut
Right.
doctoring off. I don't watch medical shows. I don't, when I listen to podcasts about updates in neurology, I do it on the drive to work and on the way home from work.
Sure.
Like when I get home, I think I used to, when the kids were little, I used to get on my car going, okay, now I'm going to my second job. Like now the second job starts.
Yeah.
Now that there's not that much to do except feed my dog and, watch bad TV. But that's kind of how I looked at my life. Work was work and home was a different job.
Sure. That was actually going to be one of my questions is like if you've watched any of like the medical drama and like
No,
how much they make
the
up.
inaccuracies drive me insane.
Yeah.
Like I sit back and go, oh my God, that would, like it's
Yeah.
just like the inaccuracies really bother me. Now that's the medical dramas. I don't know what study it was, but I read several years ago that one of the most accurate medical shows on TV was Scrubs, and I used to
Is that
watch Scrubs.
right?
So I could watch Scrubs. Scrubs was not inaccurate. I mean, it was, there
Scrubs
might
is a
have been
fun
some stuff
watch.
that was a little embellished, but I watched Scrubs. So, and I watched the reruns of it. So I could watch
Sure.
that, but the medical dramas are a little bit much for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess like the more I think about it, because Scrubs is the only medical drama I've watched, or not medical drama, medical TV show,
Yeah.
medical
Oh, and that
adjacent.
one's actually pretty accurate. The turf wars, the arguing,
Sure.
it actually, that one's pretty accurate.
And it seems like they focus less on like the specific, like his Gatorade levels are running low,
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
appendicitis is first, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. When I tried to watch ER years and years and years ago, and they had a multi-car pileup, and there was somebody with a severed leg, and they said that orthopedic surgery was too busy to come to the ER to reattach that leg, so the ER doctors had to do it, and I was like, oh no, that's
Sure.
not how that works.
How would it work?
I mean, you they would just leave the non-emergent surgery and go to the emergent surgery, like, or they call in other people. But
Yeah,
you definitely would not want your leg reattached by an ER doctor. They, like that. That's not how that works. I can't seem to hit the level of suspension of disbelief that it would need to enjoy those dramas.
so you have your own business and like Steve has his own business. What
Yeah.
is that like being a household of like two individual like business owners in completely different
Well,
fields?
so I was very blessed when I was starting my practice. He was home with the kids. So one of the reasons when you look at the history of TLG, it grew so slowly in the early days is because he was taking care of our three children. He was the main. He was not a house husband. I want that
Sure.
completely clear. I did not come home to cook dinner. The laundry was usually done, but it was shoved down into a basket and so wrinkled it wasn't usable.
Sure.
Um, so he was home with my children, and so
Sure.
the kids did go to daycare some, and of course they went to school, and so but I was very blessed that if they were sick, he got to be home with them. So
Yeah.
our ability to run two businesses really lent itself to his flexibility early
Mhm.
in his business. um, but about I don't know, 10 years ago or something, he was telling me that I was working too much. And I was like, honey, I don't work anything compared to you. And he was like, no, I think that you're too stressed and you're working too much. So I said, okay, let's count the hours. And I started counting hours after about 3 days. He said, okay, fine, never mind. Because since his work is in our house, if
Yeah.
I'm cooking if I'm cooking dinner, he goes downstairs and takes care of a few things, like I've got a few emails I got to answer. I've got to do this. So he works continually. And so I think the reason that it works is because it's out of our house. Every time
Sure.
we've looked about moving him, because he actually does need more space than he currently has. So we keep looking at moving things, and honestly, we may move out to the country and get a shop built on our land rather than try to get him a different office, because one of the things that allows him to work as much as he does is he's in our house.
what was it like to build your own business without any of that training? I say this as someone who
Oh,
I started like a master's in business and actually
yeah.
like
I
flunked out.
I made so many mistakes. We
So
would
there's
have
hope.
such a yeah, we would have such a better retirement set up if I mean, I made huge mistakes.
Sure.
Um, and people talking me into investing in things that were not being run by people who were either honest or knew how to do an investment like they were, they thought they could run a medical practice. They thought they were better business people than they were. And that's just not the case. You can run a medical practice and still not know how to actually expand into like a kind of laterally into another business. And so I've made multiple mistakes. And so it has been hard. That's been one of the hardest things. I'm stubborn enough that I haven't given up and gone to work for somebody else. I've never been employed. I've always I hung a shingle when I left my residency, and I have stayed independent. And I think I might be the only independent neurologist left in the state now. I mean, it
Wow.
is. There was one other one, but this recent Change Healthcare hack that kept us from getting paid for like 3 months took the other one down. He said, "I'm done.
Dang.
I'm, you know, I can't do this anymore. I can't fight this anymore."
So what does that mean
So
to be independent versus with?
so I see patients on, I pay for everything. Like there's not a hospital system that backs me up. So I pay for everything. All the billing that I do through my office is done through my office, paid to my office, and that goes into my operating capital. But I don't have like a hospital system that says we're going to pay you X amount to see X amount of patients and to do X amount of things.
Sure.
I eat what I kill. Like if
Yeah.
if I take a month off, I'm not getting paid.
Right.
In the 3 months that we didn't that my practice didn't get paid because of the Change Healthcare hack, I think I got paid maybe once or twice in 3 months. So it 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 has its pluses and minuses to be your own boss, but you don't
Yeah.
have the security. And COVID, hit me hard. I sat in my office, thinking, how do I keep a practice alive when they shut us down?
Right.
And I'd learned how to do telemedicine. Telemedicine wasn't, it was, some places were using it, but it was not near as prevalent as it was.
Mm.
So I had to learn to do telemedicine, and I
What
had
is
to
telemedicine?
so telemedicine is where you provide medical care over a video chat like this.
Oh, okay.
And so I do like I do some I hate telemedicine. I like to be able to examine my patient and see them. But
Yeah.
for people who live 2 or 3 hours away and maybe see me for migraines and they just need to say yes or no, that last medicine worked or didn't work, telemedicine is great. So we'll do a short visit, over it's just like a Zoom call, really.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there was like a 3-month period where like I forget what you called it, something happened where medical providers weren't
Change
getting paid.
Yeah, Change Healthcare, which it wasn't all the insurances, but it's like I think 80% or something, some huge number got hacked, and
Oh,
so they had to shut it down. And that
yikes.
it also affected patients because like copay cards that pharmaceutical companies give out to help with the copay cost of medicine, they wouldn't work. Pharmacies couldn't get things to run. So I mean, it affected a lot of people, not just physicians. I don't mean to make it sound like it was something that isolated. It actually affected a
Right.
lot of people.
That is wild. The amount of like hacks, like big hacks happening. We just had like the airline hack.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
That's
It
crazy.
it is it is really, it's actually kind of disheartening and kind of scary, not in a way where like I'm not one of those people that are going to go off grid and put a solar panel on my house. Even
Catastrophizing.
yeah,
Yeah.
even though Steve sometimes throws that idea around, but it does make every day Steve looks at our bank accounts to make sure they haven't been hacked.
Yeah.
I was setting up a draft thing with my bank the other day, and the guy told me they are just overrun with trying to look for fraud, help customers who have been um, victims of fraud. I mean, it is really, we really have to be careful in this day and age. We just have to be so careful.
Yeah, yeah. We had like a attack on our website earlier this year and not successful, thank God. But
I remember that it was like Steve was like, "We're fighting it off,"
yeah,
we're. So
it
I
logged into our
remember that.
email. There were like
Yeah,
300 emails of just
yeah,
spam, like trying to break
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Crazy craziness.
Yeah, it is. It is. There are some people out there that if they would put that much effort into actually an honest day's work, they'd be very successful, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I guess like, is there any advice that you would give as someone who really had to like forge your own way through like building a business and learning as you go? Like any advice that you would give to anyone who is in the place now that you were in years ago?
So use your resources. I didn't have good resources. I had resources again that thought they knew how to run a business, but actually didn't. But find some resources of people who have been successful. And so most people are glad to mentor somebody. Most people are glad to sit down and say, here's what I did wrong. Here's what I did right. Here's what I've heard has changed since when I started and how it might happen. Like, there was no such thing as social media, like
Yeah.
so things have changed even since I've started. So use your resources, find a good mentor, and don't be afraid to ask people to mentor you, because most people really are glad to do that. I have there's a young woman that I've been mentoring for a few years that just started her neurology residency, and I really hope
Ah,
in 4 years when she's done, I really hope she comes to join me. But I told her, I said, I won't let you make the same mistakes I made. We will sit down. I have 100% transparency. You can see what mistakes I made, and we will make sure that those are not the same mistakes that that are still out there.
yeah.
And so like I said, I'm glad to do it. I know other people that are glad to do it. So reach out to a mentor that has done something similar to you or started a business of their own, and and just sit down and have coffee with them or do a Zoom call with them every so often, and get their advice. It really does help.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great idea. There's such this like culture, especially I think in America, of not wanting to impose on people.
Of not wanting to post and not wanting to seem ignorant in what you're trying to do.
Oh
And
my
and
God,
so
yeah.
and so it learning is not, when you're learning, you're not ignorant. You're asking. That's the last thing an ignorant person does, is ask for help and ask for guidance, because that if they were ignorant, they think they would know it. They already know it all, and they don't need the guidance. And so,
Yeah.
don't think that you're imposing on somebody, or that you're afraid that your ignorance may show through, because that's not the case. They're gonna help you see where you've gotten misinformation, or you've just assumed something that's not to be true. And mentors love to do things like that.
Are there any like red flags that you've like accumulated through the years of like stuff
If
that kind of,
anybody tells you this is an easy way to make money, run away.
mm,
There's not an easy way to make money. There's
yeah,
only a lot of work to put in. If somebody says, look, you can invest in this and you're going to get this huge return and you're just going to be rolling in money, it's either illegal or not true.
and to be
That's just,
so like casual about like it's easy money
yeah.
when it's people's brains and spines and
Yeah, yeah.
nerves.
Well, where I've made those mistakes is, oh, let's invest in this building, and this building is going to make us money, and then the
Oh
building
yeah,
people don't pay you rent.
for sure.
It's things that. And in fact, I remember sitting down with my attorneys after we had to get rid of this one business, and I was like, okay, God obviously wants me to take care of patients, because anything I try to do outside of taking care of patients fails miserably. So I'm just going to focus on taking care of patients, because that's what works for me.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of thing that I mean is you have, especially if you end up having a certain amount of success, then people come to you going, okay, we want you to invest in this. We want you to try this. We want you to promote this. And you're going to make all this money. And it's just not that easy. And
Sure.
so anytime you see somebody that promises you, I can do this for you, just always proceed with caution. It doesn't mean you shouldn't investigate it, but you should just really, really proceed with caution.
For sure. I think that's great advice, like paying attention to what is actually like practically rewarding you
Yeah.
versus like big promises.
Yeah. Big promises come with big headaches, or sometimes they're big lies. I mean,
Oh
it's,
yeah.
and even when somebody is not just purposely trying to lie to you, what happens is they think that in their mind that they've got the quick fix, and
Mm.
they're trying to convince you to jump on board, and it's just not. It's just
Yeah.
not a quick fix. That happens all the time with small businesses and people who are starting out, and then you have to dig yourself out of that hole to be able to go on and do what you would have already, where you would have already been to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the most like profitable, amazing, like spiritually fulfilling stuff that I've ever done in my life have been risks, not like
Right.
promises.
Right.
That makes a
Right.
lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know you talked a little bit about the like, well, it's easy money. Like, are there any other misconceptions about your industry? Because there's so many in gaming.
Oh,
I feel like we encounter
there's
50 every day.
yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions about um about just what goes on the other side of the doctor's off the door in the doctor's office. And
Mm,
it's not unfair misconceptions. It's just that um, insurances will frequently blame, like if you get a medicine denied, you'll call your insurance company, and the insurance company will say, oh, all your doctor has to do is do this prior authorization. And so then they put it back on us, and they were like, well, they said you haven't done some paperwork. Well, I do the paperwork and it still gets denied. And, so
right.
sometimes I'll tell patients, your insurance isn't going to cover this period. Well, then they call the insurance says, well, all your doctor has to do is a PA. And I'm like, I've done PAs for this 100 times.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not going to work. And so there's a lot of misconceptions about what kind of happens behind the scenes, and it all seems to roll down on the doctors in the doctors offices. The pharmacist says your doctor didn't do this, or the insurance company says your doctor didn't do this, and sometimes it's true. Don't I'm not
Sure.
I'm sometimes it's true. Some of the offices don't try hard. My office does, because we we really want to help our patients, and we're all very stubborn, so that helps. And so we try very, very hard, but most offices I know do try hard. It's just that it's not as easy on this side as it as it seems like, from what people hear and say, and the
Yeah.
and the conceptions on TV. Like, again, that goes back to, I for years I said, um and not really your age, because y'all never watch soap operas, but for
Yeah.
years I said the misconceptions about medicines come from soap operas, because when I was a kid, all the doctors were like uber wealthy, like
Yeah.
yachts, kind of gigantic mansion, uber wealthy. They saw one patient a day, had affairs in closets, and everybody was like, well, look how easy the doctor's life is.
Yeah.
And that's, there's this misconception. And that was one thing I liked about Scrubs. Going back to Scrubs, they lived in a modest little apartment.
Yeah.
They didn't have extra money, mainly because they were residents, and they really don't have extra money.
Yeah.
But nobody was living in, big mansions and that
Private
sort of thing.
helicopters and yeah.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. And so it kind of goes back to just what our conception in the U.S. is about medicine, and it's changed a lot. Like in the 70s and 80s, a lot of doctors were uber wealthy, but that medicine has changed, and most doctors make a very good living, and I make a very good living, but we aren't in. Like I said, there are pharmaceutical reps that call on me that make more money than me.
Right. Right.
So you know so you just have to put everything in perspective. So there's a lot of misconceptions. We've actually, my office and I have talked about starting a YouTube series about like just kind of
Yeah.
explaining and saying it and not trying to defend just the back office, because sometimes it is their fault. I'm not trying to say that, but just saying
Sure.
this is what we're actually doing. This is what prior authorization means. I recently started using one of the large language AI models for my notes and to help me with appeal letters, because if I need a drug for a patient, I will send the prescription, it'll get denied. I do a prior authorization request, it gets denied. And then, if for most of pharmaceutical companies, if I do an appeal letter and it gets denied, then they'll give the patient the drug for free, particularly these patients like MS patients, like sick, really sick
Yeah.
patients. Um, and so I have to send the prescription, do the prior authorization, and then do the appeal letter, and then get a second denial, and then they'll help. Frequently, will help the patient,
Wow.
unless the patient has just a huge income and can afford the drug themselves. But I live in Arkansas, so that doesn't
Yeah.
happen very
I
often.
don't know many people
So
that can.
yeah, so, I've started using one of the AI the models to do my appeal letters. Now that it's not HIPAA compliant, so I can't put the patient's name in there, but I will just say,
Yeah.
need an appeal letter from a neurologist's office for patient denied X drug for X reason. This is why this is the best drug. This is why the other drugs that the insurance company prefers won't work. And then I let the AI model actually do my appeal letters, and it's actually been working really well. It
Wow.
takes me 5 minutes instead of 30 minutes to do a good appeal letter,
For
so
sure.
that's helping. So it's really important in medicine for us to use the technology that's available to us too.
I've been seeing like the occasional headline. It's on the internet, so I don't know how true it is,
Yes.
but like about AI in medicine, like AI
Yeah.
surgeons and like crazy, like futuristic kind of stuff. What do you think about all that? Is AI's use in medicine more suited towards like the kind of clerical, like writing letters and stuff like that? Or do you
Right
see,
now it is. Right now it is because, well, first of all, we've been using AI in medicine for many years that people don't realize. EKG machines have put out their own reading, and then the human goes back and sees if they agree with the machine for years. So we've been
wow.
using AI for years. So doctors that are like, I'm against AI, I'm like, you used AI in your residency. So, we this is just much more sophisticated AI.
Sure.
So right now, the best place for it is clerical. The In the future, it may help decision making trees with somebody's problems, but there's too, it mines information from the internet, and there's too much false information on the internet.
Yeah.
And so you have to be really careful about what it mines. So right now I'm using it for clerical. It's called, they're medical scribes. So
Mhm.
it's just like if I had somebody in the room typing a note with me, this AI is listening to my conversation with the patient and then makes a note. I read the note, make sure it doesn't say anything crazy, because sometimes it does. A
Yeah.
62-year-old woman was not pregnant. I have no idea what we said that made the AI think she was pregnant, but it is definitely not the case. So I do read it. So it helps me. It helps my notes be better. It doesn't really help me be faster, because I
Mhm.
could type in a note while I was seeing a patient very, very quickly. But it I'm able to not have to look at my iPad. I'm able to look at my patient, make eye contact with them, speak to them directly about
Right.
whatever issue they're having. And the scribe is picking everything up. So I give better patient care. My notes are better and more complete because the scribe puts in things. If we start talking about my grandbaby, the scribe puts it in there. So
Yeah.
the note's more complete, and I'm able to pay complete attention to my patient. And so AI, and I'm slowly adopting AI, and in multiple different places to try to help me be more efficient.
In like the tabletop RPG space, there's a very strong like anti-AI kind of voice, mostly in the area of like visual art and stuff. Is is there like a strong anti-AI movement in like the medical field?
So, first of all, I don't. I think artists and the lovely talent that so many of these artists have, that's purely their brain. This is them. It's not a machine And even the AI generated art generates it from other people's actual creativity. This machine is pulling, and so
Yeah.
I I'm not a lover of AI art. Like
Yeah.
I think that's going too far. We do have to be able to preserve our uniqueness as humans,
Yeah.
and that's why one way we can do that is we can put our foot down in multiple places.
Right.
So when it comes to I in the medical field where you see the concerns are using it for diagnostic decisions,
Mm.
because the machine is going to pull information that's not correct from the internet, and uh, it's going to make decisions that may not be tailored to your patient specifically.
Mm.
Every patient's different. Their response to medicines, their commitment to staying with their medicines. Like in the world of
Yeah.
MS, we have medicines that are once every 6 month infusion, or we have shots that are every day. Well,
Right.
which one do you think is going to be easier to be compliant with?
Yeah.
You're going to go with the every 6 month infusion, right? So having a machine make those decisions, just like in the movie I, Robot, the machine calculates that he couldn't save the little girl. I can't remember what the sequence was, but
Sure.
the machine did these calculations. You don't want a machine deciding each individual human's, so you still got to put in the human aspect of the information. And
Right.
so that is what people get concerned about in medicine. Now I have to say, in medicine, doctors are also quite reluctant for change. Like
Mm.
it's a community that prides itself and has a very large egos. And so um, they don't, there was a big fit when we all went to electronic medical records, and there's a big fit when we,
Sure.
start using AI. So there's going to be resistance in the community just because it's different.
Yeah.
But where I do worry about it is I don't think a machine can replace the human art of medicine, just like I don't think a machine can replace the human visual arts, the ability
Right.
that a
Right.
human has to do it. Uh, One of y'all's artists, Zoe,
Yeah.
uh,
They're
that art
incredible.
is incredible.
Yeah.
Like there is no way that my mind would ever be able to come. I'm a very analytical person. I am not an artistic person in any way. But there is absolutely no way that my mind could ever come up with something like that. And then even if my mind came up with it, my hands wouldn't be able to put it on paper.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
trying to say we don't need her, we can have machines do it, and the machines learned from people like her, I have issues.
It
I,
doesn't
ha- I have
compute.
issues
Yeah.
with that. Yeah. If it's something anatomical, if I want to show a picture of of a brain to a patient, and I just say, "Hey, AI, show me a picture of a brain," I'm fine with that. But
Sure.
if it's something that is to be admired for its beauty and its uniqueness, then we need to keep the human factor in there.
Exactly. I love what you said about like medicine as art. That is like that's so interesting.
Well, and that used to be talked when I was doing training. That used to be talked about a lot more than it is now. Giving another human care and compassion, there's an art to it,
Mhm.
and you can have days where your art's right on spot, and days where your art's really not on spot. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that we all are good at it every day, but there is an art to giving care to another human being, and so that's one thing that. Um, I don't hear enough in medicine these days, and it's kind of upsetting to me.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, I have a nurse practitioner that works in my clinic with me. She's worked with me for over 15, almost 16 years now, I think. Um, and I will have to tell you that a lot of times people don't like seeing a physician extender like a nurse practitioner, but nurses, because their training is very different from doctors, nurses are better at the art of medicine.
That's what I've
Doctors
noticed.
know more science of medicine, but nurses are trained for the compassionate, hands on care of a patient. And doctors aren't really trained for that.
Right.
DOs maybe arguably a little bit more than MDs, but doctors aren't really. We're trained a little bit in that, but not like nurses are. And
Mhm.
so I will have to tell you that that where I think my now in my practice, it's not her patient or my patient. They're all our patients.
Right.
And so they see me sometimes, her sometimes, and it kind of goes back and forth. And that way they get the best of both worlds. But I have to say that when you talk about the art of patient care, so don't discount seeing a nurse practitioner.
Absolutely. Do you think that like having your own practice has allowed you and your team to take a more holistic approach to medicine as science and art?
I would love to say yes to that. And I think we do a little, but the
Sure.
time constraints in a day to day practice doesn't allow as much as we would like.
For
We
sure.
do things like if it's a new multiple sclerosis patient, I'll set aside an hour of time to spend with them about their diagnosis. And if we don't need that hour, great. I've always got something that can be done on my desk, you know.
Yeah.
But if they're a new MS patient, I frequently will give them 45 minutes or an hour. When other like new migraine patients, I may set aside 30 minutes. Now, sometimes they need more, sometimes they need less, you know,
Sure.
but for so we do, because I am solo practice and I run my own practice, I can do things like that. And
Yeah.
I got contacted by somebody who needs an infusion urgently and needs to, for insurance reasons, needs to go to my center. And I told her, okay, well, we're going to, if we can get the medicine ordered this week, we will. I said, I don't have one chair being used on Mondays and I have an extra pole. You can come in and sit in the office next to me in a chair and, you know,
Right.
get an IV. So I'm able to do some of those stuff. We frequently will, when we get frustrated about the whole process, we will frequently sit down as a team and go, but remember, this patient doesn't have anything to do with their insurance company. This is that, you know, this patient still is really sick. And
Yeah.
we all just remind ourselves of that. So we try to be, we try to put each other in checks and balances when we start getting too cynical. And
Sure.
at my office, I tell everybody, when we're in our individual offices and we're talking to each other, we can be as cynical as we want, so that when we go into to a room with a patient, we're appropriate.
Just get it all
You
out of the
know,
system
it
and
gets all out of the way. You
yeah.
know, you can vent back here, but when you go in the room with the patient, that's when you put on your professional face and you act professionally. That sometimes that's not, you know, we aren't perfect, but
Oh yeah.
that's kind of the rule in my office. You can be as cynical as you want behind closed doors, but when you go in with the patient, you got to be nice.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I mean, do you find that you deal with like burnout?
Yeah, we have.
Sure.
We actually have started. We call them happy fun time clinic days, and we every 3 months we block out a day where the clinic that we will sit around. We played Cards Against Humanity one day, you know,
Yeah.
like we will sit down and we will play a game, and we will go out and get margaritas, or we'll do something to try to kind of just kind of decompress a little bit.
Right.
But we actually we deal with burnout a lot, and like I said, sometimes
Sure.
we don't deal with it the right way. We deal with it the wrong way sometimes. But
That's
we
human, you know.
yeah, you know, you always kind of do some things. Sometimes you think, why did I let that get to me today, you know? And so but we struggle with that. It can be, it can be very difficult. 95% of my patients are wonderful people.
Yeah.
5% are very difficult. So
Oh
the
yeah.
the 5% sometimes will get to you, you know.
Of
And
course.
so
It only takes one to like
it just, yeah, and that's what I mean. You have to work on remembering the positives and
yeah.
putting the negatives in the proper perspective.
That
So
sounds like you guys have a lot of freedom to like make stuff work and like kind of work around people's needs. Like it sounds like having and like independent practice like the right
yeah,
sort of term?
yeah, yeah.
It seems like that would fill like a really important need for a community. Just having one place that isn't like
Right. Like
corporate,
it
I
within the,
guess.
yeah, yeah. It uh, um a lot of people don't want to deal with there's there's all these government regulations that like
Sure.
once a year I have to sit down and do this. It's called MACRA to be able to keep seeing uh, Medicare patients. And
Sure.
you know, I'm a neurologist, so I treat elderly, so I have to be able to see Medicare patients.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time they did the MACRA, the first time it came out, and I was trying to figure it out, and I was furious. I mean, I was, because it was language I don't even know what, like, you
Oh,
do
yeah.
this for an impaneled patient, and I'm like, what the hell is an impaneled patient? You know, like I don't even know what. Like I was googling words because it's
Yeah, yeah.
lawyers that wrote this for doctors, and we didn't. You know, I was so angry I could not see straight, and my nurse practitioner had to come in and just tap me on the shoulder and say, "Walk away." Just, I will figure this out. And she and I figured it out. Well, so come to find, so I was like, okay, I know that I have to get a certain score out of 100 to not get this Medicare cut. And I know that because I'm an independent practice, I get a score of 11. But what score do I have to have? So I spent days making templates in my EMR just to make sure we did everything, and coming up with workflows and making sure there's this codes and doing everything. And I spent days and days doing it. And I finally found an article that told me what score I needed that year to keep from getting cut. It was 15. I spent days,
Oh my
days and
god.
days. I was so angry
I think
all over again.
I would just
I
walk into the
was
sea and be gone.
furious. I was like, I've done what? You know, and so the past 4 years or 5 years, I've paid this company to do it for me, which infuriates me that I have to pay this company to do it for me.
Yeah.
But it's better than me literally having some sort of aneurysm because I get so angry about the stuff. And so I remember one of the rules last year was to have you addressed burnout with the other providers in your office, and come up with a plan. And there's just me and my nurse practitioner, right?
Sure.
So I walked into her office and I said, Brenna, and I said, I know you can get burned out. Please feel free to come to me to talk to me about burnout. And we have a psychologist in our office that has agreed to see you should you feel like you need his services. And then I checked the list. Yes, I
Incredible.
took care of that. I, you know, it's one of those things that a lot of doctors had just, whenever they put in all of these governmental regulations, a lot of doctors just went to work for hospital systems and bigger systems because they thought, I can't tackle all of this. And
Right.
I've been stubborn enough that I decided I was going to tackle it, and I've been able to do it. I haven't got any Medicare cuts, thank goodness, knock on wood.
Yeah.
And so we've been able to do what we need to do, but again, we have to really find resources. And so there's one day a week, usually Friday like this, that I set aside to do whatever needs to be done to either fight with insurance companies so that I can get medicines for my patients, or figure out what the latest macro guidelines are, and make sure that I meet those.
Right.
So being independent in a smaller community, like you were talking about, for a community, a lot of primary care can still be independent, but a lot, even in Arkansas, a lot of our tiny towns, they've all gathered together in a system. Here it's called our care, and they've all gathered together so that they can have power as a group, as a system, to help defer some of the costs of having all these systems take care of all these governmental check and insurance checklists. And so I understand why doctors have done it, so they can keep delivering care and they don't have to do what I do, which is set aside time. I've chosen it to do this way because I just like being independent. I know that if it infuriates me to figure these things out, but I also know it'll infuriate me to have an administrator sit down and tell me you need to see more patients so I can get paid more. So that,
Yeah.
because if you have an administrator that in these hospital systems, their job and they're being judged on how much they get you, the physician, and the healthcare providers, physicians, nurses, to produce.
Yeah.
So I know I'm not going to take that well either. So, I'm kind of at the
Yeah.
situation where I'd rather just stay independent and fight it myself.
It's good, of course, to like see people, but like quality over quantity for
Right,
sure.
right, right. And that's where the administrators don't really understand that. They want to see
Yeah.
the numbers, so they just want you to get through a checklist that they give you, and they want you to see a certain number of people in a certain amount of time. And
Yeah. Is there anything that kind of stands out as being like the greatest thing or lesson that like being a neurologist has sort of given you?
okay. So I'll tell you a couple of epiphanies for me. So I do patient education programs about multiple sclerosis, and I've been doing them for 20 years. I go out and talk to patients about the diseases, about some of the medicines that are available, depending, because the pharmaceutical companies hire me to go out and talk to patients and talk about these things. And so, for me, my training as a physician, when I go into a room, I'm to think, this is the disease process. This is what we have them on or need to have them on. How is it responding? Is the disease controlled? If so, yay.
Yeah.
That's what we're how we're trained to think. And so when I started doing these patient education programs, I had an epiphany that the patient, their goal when they come to the doctor is to feel better. My goal is to make sure that their chronic disease is controlled.
Mm,
So our goals are just sometimes disparate, especially in the old days with the old MS medicines that frequently made them feel flu-like several times a week.
sure.
And so their goal was, I need to feel better so I can have my best life. And my goal was, am I controlling your disease? And sometimes me controlling their disease is what made them feel bad.
Sure.
And so an epiphany for me was that neither the doctor nor the patient, when they're in the visit, are thinking about what the other one's goal is.
Right.
So my goal, I'd be going, look, your MRIs are stable, you haven't had any new attacks, wonderful, we're great. And their goal is, I feel terrible,
Yeah.
like, what can I
Yeah.
do to feel better?
Yeah.
And so it was a real epiphany for me to go out there and learn that the way I was trained and my goals of my visit is completely different from the patient. Not completely, but it it,
Sure.
it's a different hierarchy of like importance for a visit.
Right.
And so what I would encourage everybody is, whether you're the patient or the doctor, to when you go into an appointment, really honestly think about, what is my goal at this appointment, and what do I think the doctor's goal is? Because
Mm,
if you're going in for a wellness check, you're both have the same goal, to make sure this person's healthy,
sure.
like. But if you're going in for something else, you know make sure and if you feel like the doctor's goal is different than yours, don't feel uncomfortable saying, okay, that's wonderful that my disease is controlled, but I can barely function on a day-to-day basis. What can we do to get me functioning better?
Right.
And so that was a really important epiphany for me years ago. And the other one is, as I've aged and I've become the patient, I, I now see from the patient side. So, what I encourage doctors to do is, when you go to the doctor's office, don't let them put you back sooner because they know you're a doctor. Don't call
Yeah.
the back office to get an appointment. Go through the normal channels, just like you would if you were a patient. If you know the doctor personally, don't call their personal cell phone number to get your appointment or your medicine.
Right.
Go through the normal channels so you know what your patient is going through whenever they're trying to get a hold of you too. And
Right.
so it's not just getting a hold, it's just the whole process. How is I don't tell the staff that I'm a doctor, so I can see how nurses treat me. I can see how physical therapists treat me. Like,
Yeah.
I've before had them like, "Why didn't you tell me you were a doctor?" And I'm like, it didn't seem pertinent.
Yeah.
So what I encourage what I encourage healthcare providers to do is, don't use your connections to get any favors. See
Right.
what the patients are going through, and you can understand why patients get frustrated sometimes.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, in medicine, there's the obvious thing of like understanding the body and understanding like the electricity and the chemistry and all the
Yeah.
mechanical stuff. But that seems so important to like actually understanding relational, like either
What?
conflicts or
Right.
if you're having an argument, thinking about what is the other person's goal.
Yeah.
I lived
What?
28 years before I ever thought to think that to myself in a
Yeah.
conflict.
Yeah. If you really will not just get so deep in yours, but in anything you do. I've been successfully married to Steve for 26 years. And so, to really have all sorts of relationships in life, whether it's medical or business or personal, if you will always put the other person's goal and motivation into your thinking, you will understand that person. You'll understand the process a lot more, and sometimes you find out the person's motive is very honest, and sometimes you'll realize that person's motive is not honest.
Right.
Yeah, so
And
it
there's
helps
nothing
you both
lost in just
ways.
asking either.
Right.
What's your
No.
goal?
Yeah. I i i i have been known in several occasions to go, I don't infer and very well, like I
Sure.
don't I don't do that very well. I'm just going to tell you exactly what I'm thinking. And if I offend you, please let me know. But I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm thinking, and then you correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
So
That's a good way to go.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I think that that's just about all the time we have, but thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And it's so nice to get to have a discussion with you. And I can't wait to, Steve keeps talking about having a Troller Games getaway,
Yeah.
but of course I trust me. I'm trying to keep you from having to go to Roswell. I like Roswell, but I've been to Roswell enough.
Yeah.
I am trying to get him to pick somewhere besides Roswell. The people are very friendly. I think they might actually be alien hybrids because they're
That's
so
so
friendly.
funny. Wait, the
But
one last question that I had that I
sorry,
forgot to ask, do you believe in aliens?
um, I'm kind of like Steve on that. I'm going to prevaricate here. Um, I believe that there's a lot happening that we don't understand,
Yeah.
whether it's truly that we have parallel dimensions that people cross in, or it's aliens from outer space, or there's there's some sort of subterranean, not subterranean, sub-oceanic, like people that we don't know about.
Right.
I don't know yet, but I don't like to say that nothing can ever be. Like
Right.
I'm not one of those people. I think it's fascinating. I think when you get into I'm not near as in deep as Steve. He just tells me these things, and I listen to some podcasts,
Sure, sure.
and it's very interesting. You think, okay, this has got to be some sort of conspiracy, whether it's a conspiracy to really cover up alien life forms. I'm not sure,
Right,
but
right.
but it's interesting to think about. It's interesting to learn about the reason people believe there are conspiracies, the inaccuracies. Like it's very, very interesting. It challenges the mind. And you've worked with Steve long enough to know that I may challenge my mind in different ways than him, but he still has to keep his mind challenged all the time. And so this all started. I don't know if he told you this. This all started when um, one summer we were going to Telluride, Colorado for a family vacation during the summer, not skiing or anything, but it was during the summer. And we lost power in our house. And we were like, well, we're not going to sit here in a hot house. We're just going to go ahead and leave a day early for our vacation. So we left. Our kids were teenagers, except Wilson, he wasn't a teenager yet. And we were driving through Oklahoma, and I said, well, we have an extra day. I don't know if we'll be able to get lodging where we were going to go to Telluride. And he goes, well, what could we do in New Mexico? And I was like, well, there's Roswell. And he goes, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to go to Roswell. And I said, well, it's like 3 hours, south of where we
Yeah.
are. And he goes, well, but we have an entire day, right? And I was like, well, yeah. So we rolled into Roswell, right? I mean, the museum people there were so nice because they were just about to close and they stayed
Sure.
open so that we could go in like it was
Oh,
like they super, super nice
yeah.
people. Don't get me wrong. It's a lovely town. It's just that I don't know if everybody likes to go as quite as much as Steve does, so so we went there quite by accident the first time. And then of course that's when he started getting the books. And I think on that vacation, I know he bought five books to start reading about the conspiracy. I think it was five. I
Mhm.
don't know how much he read on how many he read on that vacation, but I think there was at least three of them
Okay.
that he read, and he kind of started diving into the conspiracies and telling me about them and all. It is very fascinating. It's very
Yeah.
fascinating.
It's just fun
So
to wonder.
it is fun to wonder. I'm okay not knowing the answers to everything.
Yeah.
As you can tell, because I've made a couple of references, I'm a Christian. I'm not a devout Christian. I'm
Sure.
not good about going to church or anything like that. But I believe in a higher being.
Yeah.
So I keep my mind open about all the criticisms there. I can keep my mind open about hearing about these other things.
Sure. It's
I'm
something you
perfectly
feel.
fine with it. It is really I think if you just, it's just one of the interesting things that we can contemplate in life. I don't have a set opinion about it yet, but I think it's interesting to just hear some of the conspiracy stuff and read it. And, I think it's interesting.
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see.
At least, at least it's a discussion now. Used to, if you discussed it at all, people would like, okay,
Burn you at the
they're
stake.
crazy. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're nuts. So at least it's a discussion.
for
Yeah.
sure. Thank you so much for like
Oh,
all
Grace,
of
it
your
was good to
time.
meet you. I'm sorry I went so much about into medicine, but
Oh my God, it was
um,
so interesting. I love hearing
well,
about this side
just
of it.